So, Teddy, thank you so much for doing this. Let's start. Let me start asking you where you were born, where you live right now, and maybe some story that connect these two places.
Okay, so I was born in Ghana. But I live in Accra. So Accra is the capital city of Ghana. Ghana is in West Africa. I live and work in Accra. At the moment, I'm in Los Angeles doing some work in a neurosurgical lab because I do neurosurgery. So once in a while, I get the chance to come into a lab and practice on my skills without risking killing anybody. So, so, so neurosurgical labs are very useful. I come to the one in Los Angeles because it has basically everything. A lot of the things that we don't have back at home in my theater, they have here in the lab. So, just having the open time to experiment and also to work on a paper with some of my collaborators here, it's a good opportunity. So that's why I'm in a small suburb of Santa Monica, which is very close to downtown LA.
And how it is. So you just said that from time to time you try to go to these places where the equipment or the infrastructure is better than at home. I try to do the same thing. So being a scientist, many times you you want to use equipment or simply the facilities, right? In the terms of you call the supplier and the reagent arrives next day in the morning. And how it is or how it was for you to become like a world neurosurgeon, and but being born in Africa. And so how is this, how the fact that um, you were born in Africa influenced in either the choice, either as cause or consequence on your journey as a physician, as a
Yeah,
surgeon.
I think it goes back to my upbringing. My father was a military person who was trained in the UK, and my mother is a nurse who really introduced me to storybooks and reading novels. And I think venturing into storybooks at the time that I did sort of introduced me to a world so that even though I was in Ghana, I was developing a global outlook right from, primary school, just because of the magic of books and where books can take you. And then so I ended up in a high school in Ghana called Achimota Secondary School, which was sort of built by the British to basically train the elite of Ghana, and you had to get a certain level to get there. The crest of this high school is a piano keyboard, and the motto of the school is that all may be one. So the thing was, on a piano keyboard, you have black and white keys, and the motto was that when you just play white keys, you get very good music. When you just play black keys, you get very good music. But if you play black and white keys together, like everybody does, that's when you get the power of a piano and the power of harmony. So that, right from when I was 12 years old, had been planted in me that the way out, as far as, advancement, technology, experience was concerned, has always been global. So once I entered neurosurgery and I realized that there was so much outside, and so we read, textbooks that had, things going outside that were not going on in our country. The aspiration was always to discover how these things are done and to bring them in some way to our context. And so that becoming my pursuit when I became a neurosurgeon, I had no choice but to become global. Um, so we're reading the journals, we're reading the reports, we're seeing what is happening. Yeah, we want to experience it, and I think maybe I've been born at the right time because there's internet, so I can. My first time of doing an attachment in a neurosurgical um, department as a working person was it just started with an email. I just sent an email to the guy, emailed me back. We communicated by email, and then the next time he says, "Okay, why don't you come and let's." So I go. We work together, and then when I'm leaving, he says, "Do you want to come again?" Of course. So that's it. I think so. It's a combination of my upbringing, the high school I went to, the profession I took, and how global my socialization has been since I was young. And now that neurosurgery gives me the opportunity to go to different countries. I mean, what better way can I experience this? And then, of course, to add to the fact that we're both Eisner fellows, and looking at the power of a conversation, and then the progress of collaboration and consensus. Well, I think God did not give me any other choice than to become global.
But do you think that the place where you were born and grew up can make things harder or easier? Like it's of course it's almost a
I mean, my
rhetorical
story.
question, right? As and yes, it does impact. So like I just wanted to hear from you a little bit about these yeah the challenges and but you already said something very interesting, which is the timing, right? So if it was, I don't know, maybe 20 years before, there would be no internet, the challenge would
Yeah,
be much harder.
exactly. I would have to know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, But now you can just email the head of department.
Yeah, I saw. I heard a podcast the other day. The guy said, "Look, you would be impressed with what you can get from emailing billionaires. You know, like, and you can. It
It's amazing.
it's not that difficult to email Bill Gates, and you know, like, if you know what to ask, you may even get it.
I mean, I was on
So,
Facebook the other time, and interesting. This driver, Louis, the F1 driver. What's his name again? Um, this F1 driver from the UK, very popular F1 driver. I'm just blocking.
um, yeah,
Um,
but I'm terrible with
so
the
I mean,
part.
I just write a comment on his page, and then he responds. And it's amazing what the internet can do. My
Yes.
story is very different from a few other people that I was born at the same time with. But I also have a lot of colleagues who have done the same thing. I have friends from my high school right here in Los Angeles who take me out in the evenings and things like that because they live here. So I think that ultimately where you live, yes, makes the difference. And we just, I think we're given the opportunity to dream, and we have to make a choice as to whether to make these dreams come true or not. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, they also impact. This also impacts so much in who you become, right? Because I
Yeah.
was even the other day trying to create kind of visual resume for me. You know, looking at the landmarks of my career and everything, and I said, okay, where do I start? And I started putting, that I am from Rio and that I was born and raised here. and with all the challenges, but with all the good things
Right.
also, right? And there's a Italian sociologist that studies Brazil and knows Brazil a lot, and he says that the best thing about Brazilians is their flexibility, and
Mm.
the worst thing about Brazilians is their flexibility. So like we and yes, like so like what I try to do is to use my flexibility as a competitive differential, not
Right.
as a limitation. And
Right.
like I'm proud of this,
Exactly.
yeah, of all these things.
Right.
So becoming global and working in an area that, like you said, you have to be global. You have no other choice. You have worked around the world. You have seen the world. What is your opinion on the world that we are living in? Uh, um, is this a good world? Is the world getting better, or is it getting worse?
I think that everybody who lives has had challenges. There was a time when the challenges for those who lived were big wars. There were times when the challenges were disease. And there were also times when the challenges are climate change and you know people becoming more isolated from themselves and things like that. I think every group of people will have challenges, and everything is because of the timing. Would I have liked to live in a time when there were no antibiotics? I mean, but people lived in a time when there were no antibiotics. Would I have lived in a time when um, it was impossible to do surgery? You know, um, I wouldn't have had a job just 200 years ago, just because nobody thought that anybody should even open the head and do something within it. So I think ultimately every generation will have challenges, and it does happen that our challenges are to do with, it looks like we are letting our earth run out of steam. Um, we've eaten away at the things that keeps our world moving. Global warming is becoming an issue. We're having weather changes. We have had a pandemic. We don't know whether we'll have another one, but it does look like we might. And then of course there's this segregation of people becoming more tribal, thinking more about themselves rather than globally. So I think about this question a lot. Is it a good time to be alive? I think it's whatever generation we find ourselves in, it's going to be a challenging generation. And we are built as human beings to overcome challenges. That is what we are. I mean, we are not given this important, fantastic set of computers in our heads to just come and live like worms. And we are built to overcome, you know, difficult obstacles. It just happens that this is the kind of obstacle that we're given. So, well, how do we do it? I mean, look at this. Look at the Olympic Games, for example. How can an Olympic Games be organized with nobody in the stadium, right? And yet have so much participation and have so many athletes breaking records, and everybody has taken part in the Olympic Games. Now, this would not happen just 40 years ago. It would not happen, you know. So I think we're blessed, and to be alive at this time. But we have challenges, and we have to find a way to get over them. I'm walking through the streets of Santa Monica, and sometimes I can't even hear cars, because 70% of the cars that are whizzing around me are electric, and it's just amazing what people have been able to achieve, you know. And I look at all these electric cars on the roads, and I'm like, well, I mean, are we able
There's
to
hope.
cause the change? We can, you know, we can. I mean, I saw some robots delivering pizza along the road, you know, and just stopped at the pedestrian crossing. And here I am on one side of the pedestrian crossing, and there's a robot on the other side, blinking lights, waiting for the traffic to turn green. And of course, as soon as it turns green, this robot, it's just a box on wheels with a flag, you know. As soon as the traffic light turns green, the pedestrian crossing light turns green, it just starts moving. And we pass each other. And it's on its way to deliver some pizza somewhere. And I'm on my way. Can we not, are we really incapable of overcoming the problems and the obstacles of this time? I don't think so. I think we are more than capable.
And so, okay, let's don't want to put you on the spot here, but it's an not a, what is the word? It's not authentic, but spontaneous question.
Okay.
Okay, so
Right.
like you work with the brain,
Right.
right?
Right.
And how from the limitations, all the potential and the limitations from of the brain, why are we why all this struggle to to change? Because in my opinion, I agree with you, there was no other, like no better time to be alive. Okay, so today is better than 50 years ago, and 50 years ago is better than 100 years ago, and no, 100 years ago was already better than 500
Right.
years ago.
Right.
But the way I see is like we don't move forward linearly.
Right.
It's more like a spiral, a little bit. We go back, and then the vector is like pointing ahead, and we are moving
Right.
forward. But there is all these struggles, and
Right.
sometimes it feels like they are not necessary.
Right.
But being a biologist, I try to go to first principles and say,
Right.
okay, we have these algorithms, hardwired algorithms that manifest into dopamine, serotonin, and endorphin, and calcium, potassium, moving from this and that direction. Of
Right.
course, when you go to higher levels of organization, we start not to understand so well how these things work.
Right.
But sometimes it feels a waste, all this struggle, because like it we if we rationalize for a second, then we all know what to do.
Right.
And then I but like somehow so I know that our brain is mostly a reflexive computer, right? So
Right.
reasoning comes after instincts already told you what to do. So
Right.
how do you see this? So you also have this kind of thoughts that I'm having here, and
Right.
or like when you have one of those in your hands, how do you how do you think about this kind of stuff?
It's difficult to conceptualize the miracle of what the brain is. So how many are we on the world? We're like 6 billion now, right? So if each one of us had a computer, we'd have like maybe 6 billion computers. Let's say each of us has 10 computers, okay? 10 computers. So we'd have a total of about 60 billion computers, like all over the world. Let's say they are the most modern computers, big terabyte things that can process, like, now one neuron as you know, is basically the equivalent of one computer, right? It has an input, has an output, it has a processing area, it has, the capacity to produce something. Right? Now, we have 835, or maybe let's say 900 billion neurons like this in our brains, with an immeasurable capacity to interconnect. I mean, a single neuron can have about 100,000. It's like one computer having like 100,000 USBs, to connect to other computers. And we have this, being our operative, factory. How can we limit ourselves? And it's the one thing that sort of strikes me every time I have to operate on somebody, or one thing that consoles me as a neurosurgeon is, these neurons have so many interconnectivities that as long as I stay safe and try not to damage too many at a time, I give somebody the chance to get better, Otherwise, I would be too afraid to even go into the head, because it defines who we are. But it has so much redundancy because of the oversupply of interconnected computers that we have, that, you know, but again, I find your illustration of progress very, very realistic. I mean, very, very, relevant. The spiral thing, it's more like we're at one stage for a long time going in circles, and we jump up one stage going. But I think that sort of reflects the power of leadership, because that jump is always because of one individual or a group of individuals, jumping the spiral. Because, in spite of all these billions of neurons that we have in our heads, it is easier to just sit down and watch the sun, and watch the moon and watch the stars, and and not do anything. I mean, that's what we all want to do. But then there's those people who just keep breaking the mold and keep pushing. And that's why we seem to be, going in circles. And then one person just, like what Tesla has done, or like what Musk has done. I mean, people going to the moon on an autonomous craft, I mean, going into space on an autonomous craft and coming back, complete civilians. Yeah, so I look at the brain and I see that just like a human being is capable of failing miserably at achieving anything, a human being is also capable of achieving what everyone thinks is impossible, just because this same mind is put to a problem. So in the long run, I think it's a choice. And I've seen fantastic people do great things. And I've also seen, people who are doing nothing. But the truth is, what would Musk be able to achieve for the world if there were no people to drive his cars? And what would Steve Jobs have done, been able to do, if there were no people just sitting down to wait and consume his products? And he put in a lot of work into the iPhone, and all we do is sit and look and take photographs and things like that. I think that's the whole point of us being on the world at the same time. It's an ecosystem, and some will do great things, and some will do something small, and some will do nothing, and that will all exist together.
But look, the brain wasn't really designed for the purpose of achieving great things, right? And so I look at this as a kind of byproduct, right? It was, well, unless you don't think like escaping from a lion, or like finding shelter is not a great thing. It's it, or even throwing a ball. Once I was reading this, the number of calculations required for a bot to throw a ball, it's amazing. So like it is this impressive you know organ thing, how, like you said, is difficult even to define, but it was designed without this purpose. And um, and uh, I'm even coming back things, other things that I read. We can go into that, but how do you see this? Like, um, maybe it was actually designed for not doing nothing. Okay, that's where I wanna get, compare with what you had said. Like, maybe the reason why most people don't do great things is that the brain wasn't really uh, 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 made for or selected for it. So yes, the potential is there, but it kind of needs something else to try to take this potential, like we said, to the next layer of the spiral. And like maybe some people would argue that, yes, stare at the sun at the sunset is the it's what's going to make you happy. And this is the other, maybe the other end of the of my complicated, like non-formulated question, right? And complicated question. So you have a machine that is amazing, but without the specific purpose of success, and but at the same time, uh, um, that gives you the possibility of being happy, but doesn't make it easy, because it has all these mechanisms to make you feel miserable also. So like poor humans, like we are stuck and maybe that's why the struggle, because the struggle goes inside us all the time.
It's a conflict, right? It's a conflict. The thing is, I mean, I think um, it doesn't take much to enjoy what we have on this earth. Like you're saying, what does it take to look at the sun? What does it take to look at the beach, enjoy the waves, enjoy, you know? But the thing is that in order to do that, you must do something that enables you to make time to enjoy what you have. So yes, we are sort of primed to settle, um, you know, lay back on our backs and enjoy what we have. But unfortunately, the world is such that if you do too much of that, then you do not have the capacity to even enjoy what you have, because the weather is going to change, the sun is going to go away, the darkness is going to come, wild animals are going to come, mosquitoes are going to bite, and then you're going to get ill. And it is for those times that you have to build a certain capacity. But I can imagine that if you concentrate too much on building the capacity to create abundance and to protect yourself from the world, then you do not have the time to smell the roses. And so then you're caught in this continuous warp of creating, the protection, creating the order, creating, and basically doing things that we would say are not the physiological things that you're created for. And I think that is where the conflict comes. A human being must have the privilege of being able to choose between construction and enjoyment, and for those who are able to create that balance, they experience less conflict and enjoy a bit more. than those who are not able to create a balance. The societies that, specialize in that construction part, the building a world that is protected, building capacity to develop themselves and all that, without making time to smell the roses, um, they suffer the consequences, and depression and all that become issues. So, on the other hand, I come from the environment where we're spending much more time on the other side. so, we don't do as much as other societies. So we end up being dependent on those societies that do that. And then unfortunately, we human beings are not. We're not. Caring for another person doesn't come naturally. It comes because you decide to do that. So when you have an environment where people are not doing what they should do and are depending on people who are doing things that we are meant to do, then the segregation and you know, the polarization and things come up. But ultimately, we just must all find some kind of balance, between smelling the roses and then building the houses, Yeah.
So it's a little bit like the Brazilian conflict, right? Too much flexibility becomes a problem. Too little becomes a problem. So
Exactly. Exactly. And it's a conflict that is everywhere, as long as you look, close enough.
okay, so it's I would ask you about the challenge ahead and everything, but I have a better question,
Mm.
like I'm a different question for you, and it's a curiosity of mine. Okay, so again, related to let me take advantage that I'm talking to a neurosurgeon to ask the tough question.
Okay.
Or so when we look, it's clear then to me from what we talked so far that our brain plays a very a key role, of course. And so let's even take as for discount the fact that without brain there's no life, as we experience and everything. But
Right.
even in this struggle for a better world, the fact that it's non-linear, but it goes back to these struggles in our brain. So maybe our ability to create a better world, but also to enjoy this better world, it's
Mm.
so dependent on the brain. And do you see us physically or chemically trying to equip the brain to either minimize the hurdles or get rid of them, or to improve things? Or so how do you, being so professionally so connected with the brain, how do you see the not just the power or the potential, but also the will of people to get better brains?
Well, I mean, I don't think that people are generally interested in doing hard things. It's too hard to keep doing hard things. But again, when the hard things are rewarded, then, people want the reward. So that is the motivation to do the hard thing. And the more we reward hard things, the more people would want to do hard things. So, in the environment where hard things are rewarded, people will do hard things. In the environment that where hard things are not rewarded, then people will not do hard things. And I think that's the thing about what is separating the first world from the third world. I mean, look at how much of the the money in the first world is directed to, research, for example, directed to professorial chairs and things like that. Look at how much is directed to university education, and look at how much is given to the people so that they can educate themselves, right? And then compare it with the third world where, you know, education is taken for granted, and there's nothing like research. I mean, my country is expected to put 1% of its GDP in research. We never hit 1%. We haven't ever hit 0.5%, you know. And of course, when you balance it out to the fact that we're using 70% of our GDP to pay off loans, then it becomes even clearer the kind of situation that we find ourselves. Yeah. So, are we going to want to develop this brain? I think we have so much redundant areas that we haven't, been able to utilize, that really it's more like, if I have a 300 kilometer per hour sports car, and I'm usually driving 110 kilometers per hour, and somebody asks me, don't I want to put in some, turbo boosters, and increase the exhaust and things like that, so I can take it to like 500 kilometers per hour. I mean, it's a good thing to do, but the thing is that, will I use that capacity? So I think more and more people are seeing that hard things can't be rewarded in the environments where they are. So in the US, and even in Brazil, you're going to have more people wanting to be engineers, more people want to be biotechnical scientists, and all that. Whereas in my world, it might be more different, more difficult to find people who want to do that, just because they don't see people being rewarded. Professors in Ghana are, struggling to buy even cars to replace the old cars that they have. Whereas professors here, can, afford a Tesla. So that's the thing. We're all primed to appreciate reward. And when we get reward, it pushes us in that respect. We're all basically automatic beings, Pavlovian to some extent, but the challenge of making people do difficult things is where leadership comes in. Leadership coming in to present the reward and present the hard thing and say, do we want to do this? I think it's
Do
that
you
kind of talk that Guardiola will give to Man City people if they're going to play a game. It's like, well, we've come here. Do you want us to leave with our heads bowed, or do you want us to leave with our head held high? Motivation to do something even when it's difficult to continue. Yeah.
So when you say like we don't use the capacity, it's not the full capacity of the brain. It's not like those old stories that we just use 10% of the brain. I understand this is more like we could be more creative than we are like doing nothing, right? So all this potential for creativity, for creating new things, is in every brain. Some people just don't use it. And I fully agree with you with the question of rewards. I just been putting a different name on it. It's incentives, right? People are not incentivized, and actually the incentives are misplaced,
Right.
right? And like I was talking to Dina Sharif yesterday, and like there was also no accountability for those who make mistakes.
Right.
And but I don't want to depend on this leadership. to change this. Okay, so my question to you is, do you think in a connected world, which is the world that allowed you to get your first internship outside Ghana just by talking, to the director of the hospital, uh, does this world allows for those incentives to come from abroad and to change, then and to to incentivize people to the point that they are going to access or to use the the non-used parts
Right.
of of their brains for creativity.
I think we go back to the picture you gave of the spiral and going in circles and then a small jump up and going in circles and a small jump up. I think that it's our responsibility, when we have been exposed to a bigger way, to, do something, because ultimately, um, the things that we see in the global environment can only be replicated in our environments by other people. We cannot replicate them ourselves. And that is where, again, I just come back to leadership, because leadership is not just for other people, it's also for ourselves. And the more we convince ourselves that there is, um, a better way and we have the capacity to do something better, and the better we become. So I think it will happen in my environment if I commit to doing the little I can to push something up, you know. Um, I brought some, Ghana makes chocolates. Um, we don't make our chocolates are not as popular as Swiss chocolate or Belgian chocolate, but most of the cocoa comes from Ghana. I mean, Ghana is the leading producer of cocoa, but it's not the leading producer of chocolate. Right? But the thing is that 150 years ago, Ghana did not produce any cocoa. You know, it was just one blacksmith working with missionaries, going to an offshore colony, I think Equatorial Guinea area, and then seeing cocoa plantations, right? He had gone there to build gates, but then he sees cocoa plantations, and it's like, well, this would be very interesting to have in my country. So you know what? He's coming back and he puts a few cocoa beans in his box. At the time, the people did not allow you to export cocoa or anything. He put it in his box, in his toolbox, right? Nobody saw it because he was sitting on his toolbox. This is 130 years ago. Comes to Ghana and then plants the cocoa at the coasts. One seed, the tree did not grow. Went up a bit more inland, planted again, it did not grow. This guy was so persistent, he kept going in more and more inland until maybe, I think it was about 50 kilometers from the coast. He plants one seed and then it grows. And you know what he does? He buys the land around that tree and starts the first cocoa farm, in the country. And now Ghana is known for cocoa. So and cocoa is actually maybe 35% of our income, right? Until oil came in and all that, right? So again, I'm saying that capacity to move the community up one bit, it always depends on one person, two people, a few people to do that. And it's all about timing. Um, so it may be your time to do that. It may be another person's time to do that. But ultimately, we, like we said, we don't grow linearly. We go in a very plateau step, and those steps are due to a few leadership oriented people who show people that we must use our brains.
Yes. So like I will stop here with this leadership is within message is a very good message. Before I let you go, let me ask you the three, my three survey questions.
Right.
The first one is which book you are reading right now?
Well, at the moment, I'm reading a neurosurgical book.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Trying to keep up with the dissection that I'm doing. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. I haven't been very good at reading for some time, but yeah, that's what I'm reading at the moment.
Yeah, start with the podcasts. I know that there is this new podcast, amazing one,
Great.
talking about optimism.
Okay, good.
Okay. The second question is: do you take short or long lunch breaks?
I believe in long lunch breaks, but I get short lunch breaks.
Yeah. That's another challenge, another conflict, right? Another struggle.
Yeah.
So the final question is Bitcoin. Are you a believer or a non-believer in the cryptocurrency?
I really need to educate myself on Bitcoin, but I think that it's very interesting, and it's growing, and I can already see the emphasis shifting from mining to just the upstream things, people trading, people making a lot of money, and people losing money. But I think that ultimately it's just going to break out from the small niche that it's been occupying, and as more and more currencies come up, it might be the thing of our future. I was surprised to pass by and I saw a Bitcoin ATM in a shop. Well, this thing is becoming more and more mainstream. One needs to educate him or herself. But I can see that there's committed, energy to it. I'm a bit worried about the energy situation in China and the implications it would have on mining. And I'm also worried about the impact on climate change that, this is going to have. But I think ultimately human beings are capable of, changing the, direction, and then maybe they shift from, mining to upstream, selling and things. And people are finding low energy methods of doing the mining, and I think ultimately people will realize that the future of Bitcoin is in the computers, not just being localized in China or being localized in the US, but harnessing computer, capacity from around the world. And who knows, Bitcoin might make us more global and more collaborative.
Yes. Well, count on me to help you get to know more about it. Teddy, thank you so much for doing this. We will have to do it again some other time.
Definitely. Looking forward to it. Okay.